Okay, welcome back. We're in the same module space right where we left off the previous video, and we're in the author mode of the Dropbox. And now I'm going to show you how to enable Turnitin. Now Turnitin essentially is a separate service. It exists outside of Sunspace because it's run by JISC. You'd be pleased to know that Turnitin functions exactly the same way that it used to function in WebCT. So if you've already used it in the past, then fine and dandy, everything's great. The only difference is that it will operate in a separate browser window, whereas in the past it used to function within WebCT's mini browser window. If you've never used it before, this is all moot and wasting your time and mine. So here are the two assessments I created earlier on, or at least the two spaces in which students can submit work to a Dropbox basket. I'm going to select the first one, and I'm going to, as you can see, Turnitin is flagged here as no, it's not enabled. And it's very simple to enable it. We just click Edit. We can give each basket a customized name, so you might want to call this, I don't know, it could be the essay. This one could be the, what could it be? It could be a report, it could be anything really. And all you need to do is ensure that you select this tick box and save the changes. Now if you save the changes now, it's just going to enable Turnitin to function with the default settings. I'll save those changes. There you go, and now Turnitin is enabled on this essay but not on this report. So that means that the work will be screened for plagiarism using Turnitin's default settings. Now, if you've never used Turnitin, then you will want to actually play around with those settings, and you can go in and out quite easily by hitting the settings button. So, because it's not enabled for the report, I can enable it, and I get this icon here. I can disable it again, and it vanishes. Because it's enabled here, I want to click the settings button. So I'm opening up a new browser window, new tab, and this is the Turnitin feature. You see each user will have their own specific Turnitin page. You'll see that this is actually a different website using the URL here. But you have nice breadcrumbs pointing you to the direction of which assessment you're already looking at or which ones you're in. So the first thing we want to do is populate these fields with information, and if you hover over the question marks, you will get useful information from the service telling you what they all do. Point value, I normally just set this to 100 because we mark out of percentages, don't we? You don't have to put it in there. It's only really useful if you wanted to grade work within Turnitin. But as soon as we can actually release grades via Dropbox, it's really down to individual choice whether you want to even put that in there. It is purely optional, and you can quite happily and easily leave it out. The start date is automatically populates it with today's date. This is the date that the students can see the assessment. It goes live on the date that you specify as the start date, and they can start working on it from this point, depending on the optional settings that we'll work through in a minute. The due date is the deadline, the date that the work is due in, and the post date refers to the date by which grades that you mark in this Turnitin system are posted back to the students. Really, personally, I've never really used this much. I always set it a couple of weeks later than the due date. You'll notice that automatically it's put a massive gap between the years here. I don't know why it does that. It doesn't normally do that. That's a new feature or bug, I'm not sure which we call it. So the thing that really matters is the assessment due date. If we hit this calendar, we can go back only to as far as January 2013, but you can actually go back to December 2012 and November if you wish to, by using these arrows here. So I'm just going to stick a date. I'm going to make it the 1st of November for the purposes of this video, and I'm going to make sure that it's 3 PM, which is the LRC's agreed time for deadline submissions. Anything after this, anything submitted after this get flagged as late. The post date, I'm just going to put that to a month after 4 weeks after. Oh, that didn't work. What happened there? 4 weeks after the handing date. You will get a warning about this later on, but you can largely ignore it. And this button, this tab here, the optional settings, if you click this, we'll get a drop-down menu appear. We can add all sorts of information here. We can add enter special instructions, C module guide if they're already in there. You don't actually have to populate this with anything. You could leave instructions that refer to the subsequent functionality of Turnitin, because what we're really after with Turnitin is the Originality Report. That's the report that enables us to check whether or not students have taken their work from web sources. You also have the ability to let students submit after a due date, so you can let them submit late, which is handy, if they're out of the country or for whatever reason. You might want to let them submit the work late so it can still be screened for plagiarism whilst they're handing in their paper copy to the library on time. That's always quite useful. I always let them submit it late. They will get flagged up large in bold and red in your Turnitin inbox if they are late submitters. And if you're like the business school or the faculty of law and the like, they basically, if you submit it 1 minute later, they cap the grade off, sometimes they even fail the work. Whereas apparently in ADM we have a terrible problem with work not being submitted promptly on time. We're much worse apparently than all of the other faculties combined. Nonetheless, onwards we must go. Do we want an Originality Report? Yes. If we don't, why the hell are we even using Turnitin? Because that's all it's really good for, other than kind of enabling us to give a grade and adding the odd few comments. This option automatically populates with the most useful one, I think. There are 3 options here. Students can... Do you want the students to be able to see their Originality Reports? I normally do. I prefer that they can see where they're going wrong so that they can then change their material. They may have taken bulk quotes from an academic text or a web source and failed to reference them properly. They'll be able to see this. It'll get flagged up in the Originality Report, and this function basically enables them to resubmit multiple times up until the deadline date. So I like this because it enables them to kind of précis, paraphrase, and basically edit their dubious material. It also is really good for plagiarism meetings or infringement meetings, because if we enable them to see the reports and let them overwrite those reports, there is no way they can then say to us that they did not know that the work that they were submitting has been taken from another source, because the report tells them that it's been taken from another source quite clearly. So it kind of protects you and enables the infringement meetings to kind of get to a more satisfying end in some ways. Okay. Exclude the bibliographic materials from the similarity index. It's usually a good idea to do so, because if students are all working from set text you've given them, the bibliographies are all going to seem pretty similar. Plus, we're not really that concerned whether or not the arguments and the bibliographies are bulk matching. It's really their arguments we're interested in. Exclude the quote materials from the similarity index. You can select yes, and that means that quotes, clearly delineated quotes in the text, will not appear in the Originality Report as being problematic. However, a word of caution on this front: the software isn't perfect. It can sometimes glitch out. It fails sometimes to see the distinction between single punctuation marks and double punctuation marks, and sometimes it's not very good at noting the Harvard Reference System's parenthesis feature. But anyway, I like to just hit no and let my brain do the decisions. And all these metrics can be tweaked after the fact, after the work's been submitted even. One of the features Turnitin allows you to enable is the ability to exclude small matches. So you might have stock phrases that students repeat at the end of the day. There's a few words there that we could block out, or you could set a certain percentage. It's up to you whether or not you want to do that, because sometimes the software can pick up very standardized conjunctions between sentences, and flag them as perhaps unoriginal. But there are only so many ways we can stick nouns, adjectives, and verbs together without them appearing to be unoriginal. Really, you'll be able to. When you have plagiarism, you'll see it. Turnitin flags it up quite clearly because it's big, huge blocks in highly colour-coded text. So I always select no. Allow students to see the Originality Reports. This is up to you, personal preference. I like them to see where they're going wrong personally. I think it's a learning tool. I think it's something that enables them to correct their mistakes, learn from their errors, etc. It also works again with the infringement meetings if it ever gets that far. If you can say, well, you had the capacity to see these, why didn't you act upon them? By not doing that, only you, the tutor, can see the reports. You might feel a bit more empowered by that. So I'm not convinced that it's that useful, to be honest. I think the students need to see this personally, and I've let them do that on 201 for the best part of 7 years now. Where do the students submit the papers to? A standard paper repository is the one that's shared by JISC, so just leave that as it is. You can add your own rubric. I don't know what that means, truth be told. But this option lets you save all of these defaults here so that the standard kind of metrics for any other Sunspace. So turn it in. Getting a warning that the post date is 2 weeks after the due date. For some reason, Turnitin wants us to mark and respond and double mark and feedback the students within 2 weeks rather than the 3 that some institutions do and 4 like we do. So there we go. I now have an assessment set up for my module. It seems like there's 2 set up. That might be from an earlier example video I was working on. Anyway, you have a dashboard. You have and this enables you to see all of your active modules, so you can jump into, say, a different module. You can see how many students have submitted the work, etc., etc. You can jump to each specific thing. Once the students have submitted work, these will all populate with author names. Anyway, that's how you set it up. It's as simple as that, really. There we go.